Ma'am, where are you headed?
Just up to the crossing. I'm nearly there.
Get in the truck where it's warm, ma'am. Your coat's soaked clean through.
Thank you, son.
Here, ma'am. You take my seat. I'll scoot over.
You'll stay at our place tonight. And no, the blizzard is too heavy. I'll take you back tomorrow.
That was Abel Renwick. $214 in checking. 2 months behind on the house. An 8-year-old boy in the truck seat beside him. Since October, the city had been trying to buy the shop that fed them, and a contractor had owed him $1,850 since August and stopped taking his calls. The stew on the burner was meant to last to Sunday. He brought a stranger home anyway. At the house, Jonah went up the stairs without being asked and came back down with the quilt his mother had sewn out of Abel's worn-out work shirts the winter before she died. The old woman took it in both hands and said thank you so quietly it barely carried. Abel pulled a chair over by the space heater and ladled out a bowl of that stew. The stew that had to reach Sunday, for a woman whose last name he had not asked for. He never once stopped to do the arithmetic on it. That was not something Abel decided that night. That was how the man was built. He plowed the church lot before daylight after every snow and never mentioned it to a soul. He looked at a neighbor's furnace one January and forgot to send the bill. Viv used to say he would give away the coat off his back and then apologize that it wasn't warmer. She said her name was Cora. He left it there. Her car had gone into the ditch at the county line a little after 5, and she had walked a mile of that grade in shoes never meant for ice before Abel's headlights found her. Her coat had soaked clean through and the color was gone out of her mouth. The county's nightline told him both grades into Lawson Springs were shut, and no wrecker and no ambulance was coming up that hill before morning. Keep her warm. Get fluids in her. Watch for confusion. Abel wrote it on the back of an envelope, because that is what he did with instructions. So Cora stayed. So how does a man like that end up 2 months behind on his own house, with the city circling the one building that feeds his boy? Stay with this one all the way through, because the answer has a name, and it runs straight back through the family of the old woman he had just pulled off a frozen road and set down by his own stove. Cora was burning up by 6. Abel found her with the quilt pushed down off her shoulders in a room barely above freezing, and 2 red patches high on her cheeks that had nothing to do with being cold. She told him she was fine. She had been telling him that since the road. She did not argue with him about going. That was how he knew how bad it was. He carried her into the emergency room at the county hospital a little after 7, and they took her straight back and put her on fluids. And that was the last Abel saw of her for 2 hours. The woman at registration wanted an insurance card, a last name, and a date of birth. Abel could not give her one of the 3. He stood there with his hat in his hands and worked out, in front of a stranger with a clipboard, that he did not know the last name of the woman asleep in his back room. She had a first name. She had a wet coat. Her handbag was in a car in a ditch on a road nobody could get to. So they wrote self-pay across the top of the form, and where it asked who was responsible for the account, Abel gave them his own name, because there was nobody else in that building to give. Then he sat down in the hallway and waited. 101.4. Mild hypothermia underneath it, dehydration, and a bruise coming up along one forearm from the way the car had come to rest. Nothing broken. Fluids, a warm room, and somebody inside earshot for a day or 2. The nurse worked out from the numbers roughly how long she had been out in it before his headlights ever found her. Nearly 3 hours. Standing on that frozen road in the dark, she had told Abel she was nearly there. At the billing window on the way out, they gave him the self-pay figure. $310, with a discount for anything he put down that morning. Abel had $11.40 in a coffee can over his workbench and $214 in the account. The can was the savings. The account was the mortgage, going out Friday, already 2 months late. He put down both. He did not step outside to think about it, and he did not look at the number twice. That was a 3rd month behind on his own house, and he knew it while he was doing it. Cora slept through every minute of it in a room down the hall. Nobody told her what it cost. Abel never brought it up, not that morning, not that week, not once in the 7 weeks that came after. For 19 years, Abel Renwick worked for Braddock Structural Services. Quantities, sequencing, access plans, and the safety paperwork everybody signs and nobody reads. 3 days before Viv died, he walked the temporary stair tower at a distribution center, going up off the interstate outside Elizabethtown. The drawing called for 1 gauge of steel. The tower was standing on another. He wrote it up the way the procedure said to. Sheet marked, the discrepancy circled, 1 line at the bottom. The tower should not take a shift change until somebody looked at it. Braddock's system took the report. Somebody opened it. Then somebody set the field to resolved. Behind that word, there was nothing. No repair ticket, no reinspection, no engineer's stamp, not a photograph. 2 days later, the stair moved while a crew was changing over. Viv was on the 3rd flight. The company's final report concluded she had entered a restricted zone before it was released. That sentence did more work than any sentence in this story. The insurer built its whole denial on it and won. Braddock's own lawyers cited it, and the record kept her name on the blame. Abel did not go quiet. He wrote to his supervisor, then to the man above him, then to the regional office. He asked for the corrective file. He asked who closed the report and on what basis. Same 3 questions, in writing, for 5 months. Braddock never fired him. Nobody there ever did one thing a man could take to a lawyer. They just stopped putting him on work. The jobs got smaller, then farther away. Then there was a quarter with almost nothing on his sheet, and a conversation about how business was slow everywhere. By the end of it, Abel Renwick resigned of his own free will, which is what the file says, and which is technically true. He turned the shop behind the house into a one-man business so he could raise Jonah himself, pricing jobs, permit packages, budgets for contractors who needed careful eyes and could not afford a firm. Most months, the work was enough. That winter, it was not. The city's word for it was voluntary. The offer came in heavy paper with a project name in the corner, Halyard Commons. $318 million of apartments, a hotel, retail, and a parking deck on the dead mill ground at the bottom of Halsey Street. The version shown at the community meeting had the haul road swinging wide around the houses. The version in the contractor's hands ran it straight down the middle of them. 9 homes, and Abel's shop sat squarely on the line. And nothing the city's number could buy would have Viv's pencil marks climbing the kitchen door frame, a birthday at a time. The house was not worth $318 million. It was worth all of it. The fever broke on the 3rd morning. Cora meant to leave the day after that, but her car wanted a front hub and the ice had the parts truck 2 days out, and the one motel in town lost heat when a service line came down. So Abel put her in the room over the shop another night, and then another, and after a while nobody was counting. She tried to hand him money. When he would not take it, She came back from the grocery with 4 bags and set them on his counter without opening a discussion. There was a tin of coffee in the first one. She never said how she knew there was not any. Inside a day, Jonah was calling her Miss Cora and never asked whether he could. The house went back to its ordinary arguments, chief among them the cowlick at the crown of the boy's head, which stood up every morning like it kept its own schedule. Every morning Abel swore he had fixed it the day before, and every morning the boy pointed out, grinning into his cereal, that his father had not fixed anything. He had put a hat on it. A hat is not a fix. A hat is a lid. Cora watched that argument 3 days running before she got up, wet 2 fingers, and settled the thing in about 4 seconds. Viv used to do it the same way, without appearing to look at it. Abel went back on the line that Monday, because the co-op was still clearing limbs all over Cullen County, and would be for weeks. Which meant that for 8 hours a day, an 8-year-old boy and a 79-year-old woman had that house to themselves and nothing to do but talk. That is how all of it came apart. Not in a courtroom. At a kitchen table. Over long division. With a child doing most of the talking. Jonah Renwick was a generous witness. He answered every question he was asked, and a good many he was not. And it never occurred to him that any of it was private, because none of it was strange to him. It was just his life, and he had no other one to set it against. Over 4 days, without once being asked a direct question, he told Cora Wexford the following: that he was not going on the 5th grade trip to the state capitol, that he had known since September, and that it was fine, that his father cut the crusts off his sandwich, and then ate the crusts himself, standing up over the sink, and always said he liked them better that way. That they did not turn the hall light on. Not ever. Not even at night. The bathroom one was fine because it was the little bulb. But there was an envelope in his sock drawer with $46 in it, and it was for the Capitol trip, and he was saving it anyway. That his father counted the money twice before they went to the store, once in the truck and once in the parking lot, and that Jonah was supposed to pretend he did not see the second count. That last winter the propane ran out for 9 days, and the 3 of them slept in the front room by the wood stove, and it had been the best week of the year. And that a man in a good coat had taped a paper to the shop door, and his father had read it standing in the snow without a jacket on, and stood there a long time after he finished. Cora Wexford had spent 40 years typing complaints and answers and settlement statements for lawyers, and somewhere in the middle of it she had learned that the truth of a case almost never arrives from the person telling it on purpose. It arrives sideways, from a receptionist, from a date on an envelope, from an 8-year-old explaining cheerfully over a worksheet of long division why the hall light stays off. She did not write any of it down. She did not need to. She sat there with a pencil in her hand and her heart going, listening to a boy describe the inside of a life coming apart around him, in the voice of somebody describing the weather. Abel came in a little after 6 with his hands still shaking from the cold, and sawdust frozen into the cuffs of his coat. Cora had supper on. She waited until Jonah went up to run his bath, and then she did not go around it at all. She asked him what the paper on his shop door said. Abel stood at the sink with the water running over his hands. Then he sat down and told her. Abel told it out of order, the way people tell a thing they have never said out loud. The stair tower first, then the word resolved, and what was behind it, which was nothing. Then Viv on the 3rd flight, and the report that put her in a restricted zone that was never restricted, and the insurer that built its denial on that one sentence and won. Then the 5 months of asking, the jobs that got smaller and then stopped, The resignation the file calls voluntary. Then the heavy envelope, the 2 drawings, the 9 houses, and the shop that fed his boy sitting in the middle of a road that was not supposed to exist. It took him most of an hour. Cora did not interrupt him one time. 22 months. He had not said all of it to a single adult in 22 months. Because there had not been one who would sit still for the whole thing. When he finished, he apologized for taking up her evening. Cora sat looking at her hands for a moment. Then she asked whether he still had the paper. All of it. The warning, the letters, the dates, the 2 drawings, the notice on the door. Abel said he had every page. He said it the way a man says a thing he is ashamed of, because keeping it had done him no good, and he had begun to think of those boxes as a symptom. Then here is what I know, Cora said. I typed papers for lawyers for 40 years. Most people who get run over by a government never have the documents. You have had them the whole time. There is somebody who will read every page of that. Let me use your phone. Abel said no. He said it kindly and immediately and did not have to think about it. Cora asked him why. He told her the truth, which was harder than a polite reason. That he had been beaten twice by people with more paper than him, and both times somebody had told him it would be fine. That he had no way to pay a lawyer and no intention of taking one on credit he could not clear. And that his son had already watched his father lose a wife, a job, and a business. He is not going to watch me hold my hand out, not the somebody I picked up off a road. Cora let that sit. Then she opened her handbag, the one that had come back from the tow yard 3 days earlier with the car, and she took out a folded sheet of paper and put it on the table. It was the itemized statement from the county hospital. $310, paid in full at the window on the morning of the 12th by A. Renwick, listed on the account as the responsible party. I asked for it the day my handbag came back, she said. I wanted to know what I owed you. Abel did not say anything. You spent your house payment on a woman whose last name you did not know, Cora said. You did not ask me one question first. You did not tell me afterward. You have not mentioned it once in 7 weeks. So do not sit at this table and try to teach me that taking help is shameful. You have not believed that for one day in your life. You have just never once let it point at you. The house was quiet, except for the bath running upstairs. Abel got up and went to the closet under the stairs and brought out the first of the boxes and set it on the kitchen table. Then he went back for the other 3. Her name is Meredith, Cora said. It has been 2 years since she took a call from me, but she will take this one. Meredith Wexford was 46 and had built her own firm out of nothing over 11 years. 8 lawyers, 2 floors over a bank in Louisville, and a practice almost nobody goes into because there is no money in it, suing small governments on behalf of the people they have decided to grind. Fines that double every month. Permits pulled the week after somebody speaks at a meeting. Inspections that arrive at 9 houses and no others. She had been at it long enough to have a filing cabinet full of towns. When her mother's number came up at 9 on a Thursday night, Meredith answered on the second ring. Her mother had not called in 2 years, and the only reason she could think of for a call at that hour was a bad one. Cora had to explain first that she was alive and not hurt, and that she was in a town Meredith had never heard of, in the house of a man Meredith had never heard of either. Then she asked, and Meredith said no. She said no for the reasons that made sense. 3 hours away, a client with no money, and a home occupation permit on a one-man shop, which is the smallest version of a case. Her firm took it all. And she said no for the reason underneath it, which she did not say out loud, that she was not going to have her first conversation with her mother in 2 years be a favor being asked. Cora did not argue. She said she would send 1 page, and if Meredith read it and still said no, that would be the end of it. Cora sent 2 site plans, photographed on a kitchen table under a work lamp, both stamped with the same permit number, showing 2 different roads. Meredith looked at those 2 photographs a long time in a dark office. She called her mother back at 2 in the morning. "Tell him I need everything, not the summary, every page, every envelope, every date, and tell him not to throw away one thing between now and when I get there." Meredith came up on a Sunday, stayed 4 hours at that kitchen table, and said very little. She read the way people read who read for a living, building a timeline on legal paper as she went. Every so often she asked one question, Abel answered, and she wrote the answer under the date. What she said at the end was that the permit case was straightforward and probably winnable, and that it was the smaller of the 2 things on that table. Abel asked her what the bigger one was. Meredith turned the pad around so he could see it. "Somebody closed your warning," she said. "Not a system, a person, with a login, at a time. And nobody has ever made that company say who." Meredith filed suit against the city on a Tuesday and served Braddock with a records demand the same afternoon, which is a thing a lawyer can do and a widower cannot. Braddock's counsel spent 6 weeks trying not to produce the system log. When it came as a spreadsheet with 40,000 rows, which is what a company sends when it wants a thing found late or not at all. It took Meredith's people 9 days. The report went into the system first thing Monday. Somebody opened it twice on Tuesday. At 19 minutes past 4 on Wednesday afternoon, the status field was changed to resolved. Viv died Friday. No repair document. No photograph. No second calculation. No note in the comment field. Only a credential. The credential belonged to Dwayne Holloway, Braddock's regional operations director. Holloway was, at that moment, running the structural package on Halyard Commons. For 22 months, Abel had carried the idea that his warning got buried under too much paper and not enough hours. What the log said was worse than buried. He had pictured finding this and assumed it would arrive as fury or as relief. What turned up was a quiet that took the whole room. Viv had gone in that morning believing that when somebody finds a dangerous thing, the people above them act on it. Somebody read it and typed one word instead. Buried in what Braddock was forced to hand over was a name nobody in that kitchen had heard before. Orrin Petrie had inspected buildings for the county for 31 years. On his own paper, at his own kitchen table, he kept a file on every Braddock warning he found closed with nothing behind it. 19 of them over 11 years in 4 counties. He wrote the state twice and nothing came of it. He died in March, 3 weeks before any of this started. Meredith found his daughter in Bowling Green and came back with 4 banker's boxes and a notebook. Viv Renwick's name was in the notebook. He had written it down the week she died, and next to it, in pencil, the word again. By the 7th week, Warwick Teague understood that the paper was moving somewhere he could not reach. So the city taped a closure order to Abel's shop door over a possible hazard in a service panel nobody had touched since it passed. That was the mistake. By then, Meredith's firm had subpoenaed the city's own inspection records, and what came back read like an indictment written by the defendant. 9 houses stood on the contractor route. All 9 owners had refused the city's offer. All 9 were inspected within 5 weeks of refusing. No other block in Lawson Springs got that kind of attention. 2 streets over, a body shop had run on an expired permit for 3 years without a single visit. And a forensic accountant found $236,000 in community outreach payments running out of the project account to a firm called Bellamy Public Affairs, which belonged to Warwick Teague's wife's brother. When Meredith's people asked what had been delivered, nobody could produce a page. Then there was the voicemail. Teague had left it at the developer's office in the 6th week, careful the way he was always careful. Once the compliance situation made continued operation impractical, Mr. Renwick would likely be more receptive on price, and the matter was still manageable if Halyard held its position. On its own, a man doing paperwork. Set beside 9 targeted inspections and $250,000 paid to his brother-in-law for nothing at all, it stopped being paperwork and became a sentence in an exhibit list. The hearing on the injunction ran on a Thursday morning in the circuit court in Cullen County, and the room filled past the back wall. Jonah sat in the 4th row beside Cora, holding his father's old folding rule in both hands. Meredith put the 2 site plans up first. Same permit number, 2 roads. Then the soil report signed 5 days before the borings came out of the ground. Then the inspection records, 9 addresses, 9 refusals, and the dates laid beside one another in a column that did not require an argument. Then she played the voicemail. The city's attorney had one card, and he played it. He held up an invoice. 3 months before any of this, Abel Renwick had been paid $900 by an excavation company bidding on Halyard Commons. Not a private citizen. A paid vendor whose objections began after the work stopped coming. The room shifted. A reporter started typing. Meredith did not object and did not hurry. She entered the original request from Ledbetter Excavating, which asked Abel to price the storm drainage because the sheet did not line up with the public documents, dated 12 days before he knew his own property sat on that route. Then the estimate he sent back, with a line across the bottom in his own hand. Do not rely on these quantities. Permit conflict unresolved. He had told the contractor there was a problem before he ever walked into a public building about it. The judge granted the injunction from the bench. The closure order and the penalty were stayed. The city was enjoined from any enforcement action on the 9 Halsey Street properties. The redevelopment agreement froze where it stood, and the whole file went to the County Ethics Board and to the Commonwealth's attorney. Nobody arrested Warwick Teague in that room, and no judge finished anything that morning. Real justice runs slower than a hearing. But when he walked out of that building, the 9 families he had called a consolidation watched him go with nothing left in his hands. The permit case was the small one. Meredith had said so at that kitchen table. Kentucky gives a family 1 year to bring a wrongful death claim. Viv had been dead 22 months. What Meredith argued was that the clock had never properly started, because the one fact that would have told the family they had a case had been hidden by the company that hid it. A court cannot fairly ask a widower to sue over a fact somebody deleted before he could see it. The judge let the case go forward. It never reached a jury. Braddock and its insurer settled 11 months later, terms sealed. What is not sealed is the rest. Viv's file was reopened. Investigators confirmed the warning had been closed with no corrective action behind it, and her name came off the finding that put her in a restricted area. There had never been a restricted area. Dwayne Holloway was removed from Halyard and then from Braddock, and the state opened its own matter on the 19 closures in Orrin Petrie's notebook. Warwick Teague pled guilty to felony bribery and to tampering with a public record, 26 months in state custody, full restitution, and a lifetime bar from any public office in the state. He made a short statement to the court first. I picked Abel Renwick because I figured a grieving man would fold. I knew his boy depended on that shop. I used the word redevelopment. It went down easier than the accurate word. Knowing it, undid nothing. The city gave the permit back and refunded the penalty. And that spring, Abel opened Renwick Safety and Estimating. 2 people working for him, 3 desks, a new sign over the old door. The first thing he did with the settlement was pay off the house. The second thing he did was set up an account at the county hospital that pays the balance for anybody brought into that emergency room by somebody who is not family and cannot answer the questions at the desk. He did not put his name on it. Cora found out anyway. She always did. Cora Wexford rented a small house 4 blocks over and stayed. She collected Jonah after school on Tuesdays, and Viv's quilt lived on the back of her sofa where anybody coming in saw it first. Meredith started driving out on Sundays after the last of it closed, not before. Abel noticed that she had waited, understood why, and thought better of her for it. At first she came for her mother. Then she stayed for supper. They did not fall into anything quickly. They argued too much for that. Meredith held that the law was the only thing that ever moved any of it. And Abel held that it took 22 months to do what one honest man could have done in an afternoon. In April, the school put on a spring concert. Abel got there early and sat down next to Cora in the 3rd row. There was an empty seat on his other side, and she noticed it and said nothing. The lights went down and the children came out. And just as the teacher raised her hands, Meredith came in at the back with a coffee in each hand and worked her way down to the end of the row. "Anybody sitting here?" Abel looked at the chair. "Somebody is." She sat. On stage, Jonah found the 3 of them in the second measure and grinned so wide he lost his place and had to run to catch up. Afterward, they crossed the parking lot, the boy talking the whole way without stopping for breath. Then he looked up at Meredith. "Are you coming out Sunday too?" She looked at Abel. She let him answer that himself. Abel took one of the coffees out of her hand. "There will be a plate." A warning takes about 4 seconds to close. Nobody sat down and decided what that would cost. It just turned out that the cheapest thing in that whole company was the one thing holding a woman up in the air on a stair tower. He kept every page for 22 months, while it did him no good at all. Then one night in an ice storm, he stopped his truck for somebody who was not going to make it to the crossing, and a boy gave up his seat. That was the whole mechanism. Somebody watching this has a file in a drawer that nobody ever answered. If you believe the people who raise a hand early ought to be heard before the accident, instead of after it, subscribe. The next story is about a man his whole town had already made up its mind about.